How should the Minnesota Vikings feel about their wide receiver depth? Pretty good. In fact, better than they could have felt coming into camp, in part because of BC Johnson. So if you remember, BC Johnson tore his ACL last year on one of the first days of practice, had to miss the entire season, and coming back, well, of course, there's new emerging players that he has to compete with. They drafted another wide receiver in the 6th round in Jalen Naylor. Amir Smith Marset was drafted last year, and yet BC Johnson still seems to be ahead in the competition. So the Vikings have Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen locked in. KJ Osborne, right from the outset of training camp, showed that there was no wide receiver 3 battle whatsoever. He was set with the first team, never took a rep with anything but the first team, and really shined in this offense from day one of practice, which left it to be BC Johnson, Amir Smith Marset, Albert Wilson, Jalen Naylor, all of them to battle against each other, and Tristan Jackson, who was on the practice squad last year, Myron Mitchell, another name as well. But BC Johnson has really solidified himself as a part of this roster and has had a very good camp and a very good preseason. And Wes Phillips, the offensive coordinator of the Vikings, at the podium today raved about the blocking. Yes, the blocking and the solidness of BC Johnson, and pointed out that he was helpful in the touchdown run from Ty Chandler.
You know, BC's kind of a guy, he's kind of a jack of all trades. He's detailed in the pass game with his routes. He's strong. Route contact, he's very strong, and then he does a lot of dirty work. I mean, I think you've seen in some of these games, I mean, he's cutting off defensive ends on the backside. He's inserting on some of our gap scheme runs for safeties that are playing hard downhill. You know, the touchdown we had in the game that Ty Chandler scored, I mean, BC stuck his face right in there, and a safety was hitting it pretty hard in there, and he's shown he can kind of do some of those dirty jobs as well as be productive in the pass game.
Now, you may roll your eyes and may say, wait, isn't it about deep balls and spectacular catches? Well, yes, and a lot of times it is. But in this offense in particular, they ask wide receivers to do quite a bit of blocking. So that's an important detail that points us toward BC Johnson as being wide receiver 4. Also, 2 separate times throughout training camp, Kirk Cousins has come to the podium, been asked about his wide receivers, and mentioned that he believed that BC was on the rise and that he was someone that he could trust when other wide receivers went down. He cited the game against Carolina 2 years ago when Adam Thielen got COVID. BC Johnson came in, caught 7 passes, and had a good game, and that he believed that was who BC Johnson is. Now, when it comes to Amir Smith Marset, though, he has more physical ability. There's really no question about it. And there have been flash plays throughout this training camp, most specifically when they were practicing against the 49ers, a deep ball from Sean Mannion, 45, 50-yard touchdown catch for Amir Smith Marset, and he's made some great plays in the preseason games. He's also had some bobbles, some drops, a fumble on a punt return. These are the things of a developing Amir Smith Marset, where he has not yet solidified himself as a trustworthy NFL wide receiver, but working toward that and has the potential for that in the future to be a deep threat, maybe throughout this season at some point. But as of this moment, it appears that BC Johnson is going to be wide receiver 4. Now, Albert Wilson was cut. He goes under the category of the Jordan Taylors, the Kendall Wrights, the players that the Vikings have brought in over the years on short, cheap contracts, just hoping that there's something left. But it was pretty clear from Albert Wilson playing in the 3rd and 4th quarters of preseason games that he was not going to be a Minnesota Viking for very long. So it seemed from the outset that BC Johnson was ahead and he was going to hold off Albert Wilson. Wilson never really got a chance to run with the 2s all the way through training camp. So he ends up getting cut despite having a pretty solid NFL career as a depth wide receiver, but not a fit with this offense. Now, as far as the depth beyond Amir Smith Marset, which that makes 5 solid receivers, but they're going to have to make a choice. Do they want 6 wide receivers on this roster? Tristan Jackson has had his moments. He's got 3 catches for 43 yards in the preseason, so he's made some nice downfield plays. for the Vikings. He's mostly run with the second team. He's a guy that the previous staff liked, but this coaching staff, there's some familiarity with him because he was with the Los Angeles Rams before, so he knows this offense. Myron Mitchell has not shown a couple of good catches in the preseason, but they might want to keep him as a practice squad member. But it will come down to, do they want that sixth wide receiver? And could it be Jalen Naylor, who is a sixth-round draft pick, is known as a downfield threat? We've only seen a handful of plays throughout preseason and training camp, but do you want to cut someone who is a sixth-round draft pick that maybe would be picked up by another team if another team liked him during draft season? So the bottom line is that the Vikings came into this training camp with a lot of questions. Is KJ Osborne going to take a next step, or is he going to be challenged for wide receiver 3? Should they have gone out and got another receiver? Is BC Johnson going to come back from his ACL? And I think there's still an argument or a debate to be had about whether they could have gone out and gotten another receiver or drafted one higher than the 6th round, because in particular, this offense uses a lot of wide receivers. Look at the Los Angeles Rams. They consistently went out and got Tristan Jackson. They went out and got Odell Beckham, even though they didn't necessarily need him. They drafted Van Jefferson, Tutu Atwell. They kept loading up that roster with wide receivers. The Vikings did not take that approach, but so far they have been rewarded for giving the opportunities to BC Johnson and possibly Amir Smith-Marset as well. Now, how that plays out through the season, if they could stay healthy, we may never talk about it. If not, and they have to call upon BC Johnson or Smith-Marset a lot, then it might be more of a discussion of should they have gone out and gotten another wide receiver. But for right now, it seems like they are in a very good spot. And we haven't even discussed Justin Jefferson, who's been on a man on a mission in training camp, annihilating the competition when the 49ers were here, and then on a daily basis, stepping up to the challenge. Adam Thielen has looked sharp. They have not played either one of those guys in preseason. KJ Osborne had just a handful of snaps in the first preseason game, and we don't expect to see him again. But this group coming back has now played with Kirk Cousins. This will be the second year for KJ Osborne as a member of the starting lineup, and it will be the third year of Jefferson and Adam Thielen. So regardless of the fact that they have a new offensive system to fit these guys in, all of them know each other and have familiarity, even all the way down to Amir Smith-Marset. And that's something that's hard to find in the NFL, is to have a group of 5 wide receivers that all have experience playing with the starting quarterback before. Smith-Marset probably has the least, but BC Johnson has quite a bit. So the Vikings coming out of training camp here as we come to an end of preseason on Saturday night against the Broncos have to feel about as good as they possibly could have felt about their wide receiver depth. And Irv Smith Jr., who technically is a tight end, but counts as a receiving weapon for the Vikings, he is coming back to health. So his injured thumb appears to be healing. He is now in practice, running routes, getting out there, not yet catching passes, but en route to potentially playing week 1 against the Green Bay Packers. And of course, the Vikings will need everything they could possibly get against the Packers. Follow the Purple Insider podcast at Purple Insider, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, whichever podcast company you use. Go download the Purple Insider pod, and also purpleinsider.com to see our written work. Matthew Coller from TCO Performance Center. Catch you later.